My name is Clara, and I am 69 years old. As a retired social services supervisor for adoptions, I dedicated my entire career to building families through love. My husband Robert and I poured immense love, time, and resources into raising our adopted son David from infancy, ensuring he had every opportunity a child could dream of. We gave him music lessons, sports equipment, college tuition, and most importantly, unconditional love. I firmly believed love defined family, not blood, and planned to leave him an equal share of my $2.25 million estate. Then David revealed he had secretly found his biological parents who were financially struggling. He demanded his estimated $750,000 inheritance be redirected to them, claiming it was his biological destiny. Mark, my biological son, screamed, "You ungrateful bastard! You have no humanity." Lisa wept. "He's abandoning you." My love questioned my family, shattered my sense of worth, undermined. I felt utterly alone, trapped facing profound loss of control. Yet as despair threatened to consume me, an adoption supervisor's meticulous understanding of complex bonds ignited a cold fury. What David, Mark, Lisa, and Brenda didn't know was my secret detailed adoption records revealing his biological parents' true desperate wishes for him to thrive independently, not for later financial support. My journals chronicled my unwavering love. My retired judge ally waited. This time, their insidious expectations wouldn't just unravel, it would expose their greed, reclaim my parental worth, and redefine true family no matter the agonizing cost. The family meeting I called in my living room felt like a tribunal. The same room where we had celebrated birthdays, opened Christmas presents, and shared countless family dinners had become a battlefield. I sat in Robert's old leather chair, the one where we used to read bedtime stories to all 3 children, while David stood by the fireplace, looking like a stranger. His posture was rigid, his eyes cold and distant, as if 31 years of memories meant nothing. Mark paced behind the sofa, where Lisa sat crying, and Brenda hovered near the doorway, like a vulture waiting to feast. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed harsh and unforgiving as I looked at my children. These were the faces I had kissed goodnight for decades, the hands I had held through scraped knees and broken hearts, the voices that had once called me Mommy with pure love and trust. "Mom," David began, his voice filled with what I can only describe as desperate longing mixed with cold determination. "I love you, but they're my real parents. They struggled their whole lives while I lived in comfort. This $750,000 is my inheritance, and I need it to help them. It's my biological destiny. Your love isn't enough to change that fact." The words hit me like physical blows. Real parents, biological destiny. Your love isn't enough. Each phrase carved deeper into my heart than the last. I felt my chest tighten, my breath becoming shallow as the reality of his betrayal sank in. Mark exploded before I could respond, his face flushed with rage. "You ungrateful bastard. Mom sacrificed everything for you. She worked double shifts to pay for your college. She stayed up nights when you were sick. You're a greedy, heartless orphan. You have no humanity. You're trying to steal our inheritance." I watched my adopted son's face crumble at the word orphan, but instead of backing down, he straightened his shoulders with defiant resolve. "Mark, you don't understand what it's like to wonder where you came from. These people gave me life. Clara gave me a good childhood, but blood calls to blood. I owe them this debt. They're poor because they couldn't keep me." "David," I said, my voice breaking, as 31 years of motherhood seemed to crumble before my eyes, I raised you every opportunity, every lesson, every sleepless night when you were sick was out of love. Your inheritance was always secure with me. This isn't just money, it's a betrayal of our shared life. Don't you remember when you were 8 and broke your arm falling from that oak tree? I held you all night in the hospital singing to you. Don't you remember graduation day when you said I was the best mother in the world? What happened to that love? But before David could answer, Lisa tearfully interrupted her voice, shaking with emotion. Mom, how could he do this? After everything you've done, you gave up your dream of traveling with Dad so David could have piano lessons. You worked weekends to afford his sports camps. He's abandoning you. Cut him off. He's clearly lost his mind. Then Brenda Mark's wife stepped forward with that cold smile I'd grown to despise over the years. Her perfectly manicured fingers adjusted her designer purse as she delivered her poisonous words. Honestly, Clara, this is what happens when you adopt. He's not really family. Just cut him out. He's a lost cause. He's mentally unhinged to do this to you after all your charity. I warned Mark this day would come. The word charity stung like a slap across my face. 31 years of loving a child, of considering him as much my son as the children I bore, reduced to charity. I felt something die inside me at that moment. Brenda, that's enough, I said, but my voice lacked strength. The fight was draining out of me as I realized the depth of their coordinated attack. Mark and Lisa exchanged knowing looks, and I realized with growing horror that they had planned this confrontation. They began a relentless bombardment, calling David ungrateful, saying his actions proved his lack of humanity, demanding I see reason and disinherit him immediately. Their voices became a cruel chorus of condemnation. Mom, Mark said, his voice taking on a manipulative tone I'd never heard before. You're being naive. David was never truly family. This proves it. Blood tells, doesn't it? You gave him everything, and this is how he repays you. He's showing his true nature now. Think about our children. Lisa added, her tears seeming calculated now. Do you want Emma and Tyler to see their grandmother being manipulated by someone who isn't even really their uncle? What kind of example does that set? Over the following days, the psychological warfare intensified. They monitored my phone calls, intercepting messages, and demanding to know every detail of my conversations. They accused me of being too soft when I tried to understand David's perspective, and made me feel like I was losing my mind. Every conversation became an interrogation about whether I had spoken to David or his biological parents, Eleanor and Thomas. Mark would call at 7 a.m, his voice aggressive and demanding. Mom, did David contact you yesterday? Don't lie to us. We're trying to protect you from his manipulation. Lisa would arrive unannounced, searching my mail and phone for evidence of communication with David. Mom, you can't trust him anymore. He's using your good heart against you. We're the ones who really love you. The isolation was suffocating. The children I had raised, who I thought knew my heart better than anyone, were treating me like an enemy in my own home. They made me doubt my own judgment, my own sanity, my own worth as a mother and human being. I felt my world crumbling, my identity as a mother questioned my worth, undermined by the very people I had sacrificed everything to love. The formal letters arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by certified mail, like legal documents sentencing me to exile. The autumn leaves outside my window seemed to mock me with their vibrant colors as I read the cold, businesslike language that would cut me off from the grandchildren I adored. Mark and Lisa, clearly guided by Brenda's calculated cruelty, informed me in formal typed letters that I would not be invited to upcoming family milestones unless David was completely and permanently disinherited. My granddaughter Emma's 8th birthday party, where she had specifically requested that Grandma Clara make her famous chocolate cake. My grandson Tyler's high school graduation, for which I had already bought the perfect gift. Lisa's 15th wedding anniversary celebration, where I was supposed to give the toast about family love and loyalty. All would proceed without me. Your continued support of David's betrayal. The letter, stated in language that felt like legal proceedings, demonstrates a concerning lack of judgment that we cannot expose our children to until you demonstrate that you prioritize your real family over your misguided loyalty to an outsider. We must protect our children from this toxic influence. The word outsider cut deep. David, whom I had rocked to sleep as a baby, was now reduced to an outsider threatening my real family. Meanwhile, Brenda began her systematic social media campaign designed to destroy my reputation in our close-knit community. Subtle posts about hidden family issues and unpredictable behavior from certain adopted individuals appeared on her Facebook page, carefully worded to avoid direct accusations while planting seeds of doubt about my mental stability. She shared articles about elderly parents who become obsessed with ungrateful children, always with pointed comments about how sad it was when people couldn't accept reality. Her friends, many of whom I had known for years, began looking at me strangely at the grocery store. Conversations stopped when I approached at church. The woman who had spent decades helping build families through adoption was now being painted as someone who couldn't manage her own family dynamics. Then came the devastating discovery that shattered any remaining hope I held for reconciliation. While reviewing financial statements to understand our family's assets better, I found transactions I didn't recognize. David had secretly withdrawn over $50,000 from his early inheritance portion money from Robert's estate that was still being processed through probate. He had sent it directly to Eleanor and Thomas without my knowledge, without even telling me he had access to those funds. The chilling clarity hit me like ice water in my veins. This wasn't about duty or biological destiny or helping struggling parents. This was about systematically circumventing me, using the inheritance as a tool to fund his relationship with his biological family while lying to my face about his intentions. It confirmed his profound lack of trust and revealed the self-serving agenda he had been hiding behind claims of family obligation. He had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe years, accessing funds and making arrangements while still sitting at my dinner table, still calling me mom, still accepting my love under false pretenses. But the cruelest irony was yet to be revealed, and it concerned Mark, my biological son, who was now leading the charge to cut David off for his lack of gratitude and family loyalty. Sitting alone in my study that evening, surrounded by photo albums chronicling our family's history and Robert's old papers that I still couldn't bear to pack away, I was forced to confront a decades-old secret I had buried so deep I sometimes forgot it myself. The weight of that memory pressed down on me like a physical force as I remembered what I had done to save Mark when he was just 22 years old. Fresh out of college and full of reckless pride, Mark had developed a devastating gambling addiction that spiraled completely out of control. What started as poker games with friends escalated to casino visits, online betting, and finally desperate borrowing from dangerous people who didn't accept excuses for late payments. The scandal that almost erupted would have destroyed not just his future, but potentially endangered his life. Criminal charges for check fraud when he forged Robert's signature on bank documents. Threats from loan sharks who had no qualms about violence when collecting debts, a promising career in engineering about to crumble before it began. His name about to appear in police blotters and court records that would follow him forever. Mark never knew the full extent of what I did to save him. Using my connections in social services, my knowledge of legal systems, and every favor I had accumulated over 20 years of professional work, I quietly orchestrated complex legal maneuvers. I secretly paid off $150,000 in debts to criminals and legitimate creditors alike. I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, calling in favors from judges, lawyers, and court clerks to keep his name out of police records and newspapers. I mortgaged our house without telling Robert the real reason. I worked double shifts for 2 years, taking on weekend cases and holiday emergencies. I even used money we had saved for David's college fund, forcing us to take out additional loans for his education later. But I saved my son from prison and gave him the clean slate that allowed him to build his successful life, marry Brenda, and raise his children in the comfort and respectability he now took for granted. Mark never knew. I never wanted him to bear that guilt or feel obligated to me for the rest of his life. I wanted him to believe he had earned his success through his own efforts, not because his mother had moved mountains and sacrificed everything to erase his mistakes. Now, as he stood in my living room, calling David ungrateful, as he lectured me about family loyalty and moral standards, as he demanded I cut off a son for seeking help for struggling parents, the irony was suffocating. This man who owed his very freedom to my silent sacrifice was condemning another son for wanting to help his biological family. When I tried to subtly reference my past sacrifices for him, hoping to awaken some compassion or at least some perspective, Mark's response was swift and brutal, delivered with the same cold efficiency he used in his business dealings. "Mom, you're always trying to make me feel guilty with your so-called sacrifices. Your past choices are your own business. Brenda says you're trying to manipulate us with guilt and sentimentality. That's emotional blackmail, and we won't stand for it." Lisa nodded in agreement, her nursing training twisted into amateur psychological analysis. "Honestly, Mom, you're getting quite paranoid. We're worried about your mental health. You're just trying to twist history to make us look bad. These delusions about your great sacrifices are concerning." The words felt like physical blows. They were questioning my sanity, rewriting our family history, making me doubt my own memories and experiences. The gasoline I had sacrificed to afford his college textbooks, the vacations we never took because his debts consumed our savings, the sleepless nights I spent working to protect his future, all dismissed as delusions and manipulation. Then came Brenda's masterstroke, delivered with the precision of a legal document designed to trap and humiliate. A week later, a formal proposal arrived from Mr. Anderson, a lawyer I'd never heard of, but who clearly knew intimate details about our family situation. The document, written in cold legal language that made my blood run cold, offered what they called a reasonable solution to our family crisis. If I signed a binding agreement permanently disinheriting David and agreed to submit to a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation designed to prove my mental fitness for managing my own affairs, they would graciously agree to allow me limited, supervised family gatherings in their home. The conditions were detailed and humiliating. I would never be allowed to mention David's name or discuss the adoption. I would submit to regular psychological testing. I would accept their narrative of my declining mental state and acknowledge that my judgment regarding family matters was compromised. It was a trap designed to legally strip me of my autonomy while forcing me to abandon the son I had raised with love. They wanted to control my money, my relationships, and my very identity as a mother. As I held that document in my trembling hands, reading the carefully crafted language designed to make me a legal incompetent, I felt something cold and fierce awakening in my chest. They had underestimated me completely. They had forgotten that before I was their victim, I was a woman who had navigated complex family dynamics, legal systems, and bureaucratic mazes for 30 years. They had forgotten that I had once moved mountains to protect Mark, and I still possessed the knowledge and connections to move them again. They wanted to play games with inheritance and family loyalty. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The same woman who had saved Mark from destruction was perfectly capable of orchestrating their downfall. The final blow came with the cruel efficiency of a well-planned execution timed to cause maximum psychological damage. I received a formal letter from Mr. Anderson on a Friday afternoon confirming what I already suspected was coming: the permanent severance of all familial ties through legal channels. The court had accepted their motion for a temporary restraining order based on what they claimed was emotional harassment and obsessive behavior regarding David. I was now legally banned from coming within 500 feet of Mark, Lisa, or my grandchildren. If I attempted any contact, even a phone call or text message, I would be arrested as a criminal stalker. They had weaponized the legal system against me, turning a mother's love into evidence of mental instability and dangerous obsession. The document listed specific incidents they had manufactured as evidence. My attempts to discuss David's situation were labeled harassment. My gifts and phone calls were unwanted contact. My emotional responses to their ultimatums were evidence of psychological instability. They had documented and twisted every interaction to build their case against me. But I wasn't finished fighting. Not yet. Somewhere deep inside me, the mother who had once moved mountains to save her children refused to surrender without one final attempt to reach their hearts. I spent 3 days creating what I knew would be my final plea, pouring my heart and soul into what felt like a goodbye letter to the family I had built with love. A small photo album filled with precious memories, Mark taking his first steps in our old kitchen, Lisa graduating from nursing school with tears of pride in her eyes, family Christmas mornings with David opening presents under our tree, his face glowing with joy. Pictures of birthday parties, vacation trips, quiet moments of family connection that had seemed so precious at the time. I included a handwritten letter, 8 pages of my careful script, pouring out my heart and reminding them of our shared happy memories. I wrote about Mark's first day of school, when he cried, and I promised him I would always be there for him. I reminded Lisa of the night she came home heartbroken after her first boyfriend broke up with her, and we stayed up until dawn, talking and eating ice cream. I wrote about David's piano recitals, his soccer games, the pride I felt watching him grow into a good man. I wrote about Robert's funeral, how we had all held each other and promised we would always be family. I reminded them of their father's words, "Love is what makes a family, not blood or law or anything else. Love is all that matters." I left the album anonymously at Mark's front door at dawn on a Sunday morning, hoping that somewhere in their hearts, some trace of the children I had raised with unconditional love remained. I prayed that seeing those photographs, reading those memories, might crack the hard shell of resentment and manipulation that had grown around their hearts. For 3 days, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe the pictures would remind them of who we used to be. Maybe the letter would help them remember that I was their mother, not their enemy. 3 days later, Brenda posted the answer on her Facebook page with the casual cruelty of someone destroying an insect. a photograph of my torn and cut-up album pieces scattered across her granite kitchen countertop like garbage awaiting disposal. Individual photographs had been deliberately shredded faces cut apart, precious memories destroyed with scissors and spite. Her caption read, "Cleaning out the clutter." Some people just can't let go of the past, moving forward from negativity and desperate attempts to manipulate. Time to focus on real family and positive energy. In that moment, my heart shattered, beyond any possibility of repair. They had not only rejected my love, but had actively participated in destroying irreplaceable memories, treasured photographs that could never be replaced. It was an act of such deliberate, calculated cruelty that it confirmed the complete final nature of their betrayal. This wasn't anger or disappointment. This was sadistic pleasure in causing me pain. The comments on her post were even worse. Friends and family members I had known for decades, people who had eaten at my table and celebrated holidays in my home, expressed support for Brenda's actions. "Good for you. Some people never learn. You're so strong to deal with this drama." Mark's text message arrived an hour later, brief and chilling in its finality. "Consider this closed, Mom. Don't contact us again. Ever. You're causing too much trouble with your obsession. This is your last warning." Lisa began her own campaign of character assassination, calling mutual acquaintances and spreading carefully crafted stories about my alleged mental decline. She used her position as a registered nurse to add medical credibility to her claims, suggesting that I was showing signs of dementia or psychological breakdown. She painted herself as a concerned daughter, trying to protect her children from an unstable grandmother who had become obsessed with family secrets and conspiracy theories. David, seeing my complete isolation and despair from his safe distance, sent his own twisted message designed to twist the knife. "Looks like you lost Mom. My real family accepts me unconditionally. You don't need to try so hard anymore. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be abandoned." As I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the remnants of a family that had rejected me, I felt the full weight of their betrayal settling on my shoulders like a shroud. But they had made one crucial mistake in their eagerness to destroy me completely. They had forgotten that I held secrets far more devastating than anything they could imagine. Sitting in my therapist's office the following week, Dr. Sarah Chen listened with growing amazement as I revealed the deepest, most carefully guarded secret of my professional and personal life. Her eyes widened as I explained the truth. They had never suspected the crime I had committed out of love. David was not an orphan abandoned by uncaring parents. His biological mother, Eleanor Martinez, was a young woman I had known personally from my social work, a victim of a horrific assault by the son of one of our city's most prominent businessmen. The attack had been covered up by money, power, and threats, leaving Eleanor pregnant and terrified. Eleanor was desperate to give up her child not out of lack of love, but to escape the trauma and to give David a life free from the shadow of violence that had created him. But the legal adoption system would have been slow, bureaucratic, and potentially exposed Eleanor to her attacker's family, who had threatened her life if she ever spoke publicly about what had happened to her. So I broke the law. I shattered my professional ethics. I risked everything I had built in my career. I personally fabricated medical records, manipulated official channels, and created a flawless cover story that erased David's traumatic origins. I paid over $50,000 to Dr. Thompson, a corrupt physician who helped me create the documentation needed to make David's adoption appear completely legitimate and legal. I risked my entire career, my freedom, and my family's security to give David a fresh start, shielding him from a traumatic origin story that would have haunted him forever. For 31 years, I had carried this secret, knowing that if it were ever discovered, I could face criminal charges for falsifying official documents, fraud, and conspiracy. But I had done it out of pure, selfless love for a child who deserved better than the circumstances of his violent conception. Eleanor and Thomas, the man she later married, had specifically asked me to ensure that David never felt obligated to support them financially. They wanted him to live freely without the burden of their struggles or the knowledge of his traumatic beginning. They had signed documents hidden in my personal files explicitly stating their desire for David to be independent and successful on his own terms. Now, as David demanded money for the biological parents who had specifically asked me to ensure he never needed to support them, as he spoke of biological destiny and debt to people who wanted him to be free. The cosmic irony was suffocating. I had committed crimes to give him freedom from his past, and he was using that freedom to enslave himself to people who had wanted him to be independent. As I sat in that therapist's office, feeling the weight of decades of secrets and sacrifices pressing down on me like physical chains, I realized that my family had not just betrayed me. They had made the greatest mistake of their lives. They had forgotten that the woman they were trying to destroy was the same woman who had moved mountains to protect them, who had broken laws to save them, who had sacrificed everything to build the very lives they now used as weapons against me. And now, with nothing left to lose and no family left to protect, I was ready to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The days following my family's complete rejection blurred together in a haze of psychological torment that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I found myself trapped in a terrifying abyss of isolation, surrounded by the monumental weight of David's true origin story and the immense sacrifices I had made for all of them. The secret of his violent conception, the illegal documents I had forged, the career I had risked, all of it pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. But the isolation wasn't just emotional. It was systematic, calculated, and utterly devastating. The weight of concealing the truth about David's adoption, combined with the public accusations of mental instability, began to make me question everything. Had I really saved David from a traumatic past, or had I created an elaborate delusion? Were my memories of Mark's gambling debts real, or had my mind twisted normal family struggles into something more dramatic? The gaslighting was so complete, so thorough, that I found myself staring at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering if the woman looking back was sane, or if she was the delusional old lady my children claimed she was. Then Mr. Anderson, that cold-eyed lawyer, who seemed to appear wherever my family needed legal ammunition, escalated their campaign beyond anything I could have imagined. Using his connections in social services networks and adoption agencies, he began subtly leaking details of my erratic behavior to professional colleagues who had once respected my work. The character assassination was masterful in its subtlety. He never made direct accusations, but spoke in concerned whispers about my cognitive decline and unstable fantasies about adoption ethics. He suggested to former colleagues that I was exhibiting signs of dementia, creating elaborate conspiracy theories about my own family, and harboring dangerous delusions about my professional competence. Within weeks, the reputation I had built over 30 years crumbled like sand. Academic groups quietly removed me from mailing lists. Professional bodies stopped returning my calls. Colleagues who had once sought my advice began avoiding me at grocery stores and church gatherings. The woman who had once been known for meticulous record-keeping and compassionate guidance was now whispered about as a troubled senior who could not be trusted with sensitive family matters. The The financial assault came next, orchestrated with the precision of a military operation. The escalating legal fees from defending myself against David's inheritance claims and the restraining order were bleeding me dry. Every court filing, every motion, every legal response required money I didn't have. But the real devastation came when Mark reported suspicious activity on my bank accounts to protect me from myself. Suddenly, my accounts were frozen pending investigation into my mental competence. The Social Security Administration received anonymous reports questioning my ability to manage my own affairs. My pension payments stopped while they investigated claims that I was suffering from cognitive decline that made me vulnerable to financial exploitation. The irony was suffocating. My own children were claiming to protect me from financial abuse while systematically destroying my ability to support myself. Within 6 months, I was completely bankrupt. The legal fees had consumed my savings. The frozen accounts made it impossible to pay bills, and the mortgage payments I could no longer make led to foreclosure proceedings. I was forcibly evicted from the home where I had raised my children, where Robert and I had built our life together, where every room held memories of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet family dinners. My remaining possessions were sold at a public auction to cover debts. I watched strangers rifle through Robert's books, my china collection, the children's baby photos, purchasing pieces of my life for pennies on the dollar. The house that had once echoed with laughter and love became just another property transaction. I was rendered homeless, stripped of dignity and self-reliance, forced to seek shelter in a crowded, impersonal public facility where the fluorescent lights never dimmed and privacy was a forgotten luxury. But the cruelest blow was yet to come, and it involved the grandchildren I adored more than life itself. Mark and Brenda, in a display of calculated cruelty that still takes my breath away, leveraged Ethan and Chloe in a public relations campaign for a family truth charity focused on adoption awareness. The event was designed to present them as champions of biological connections and honest family relationships. Ethan, my 15-year-old grandson, who used to build model airplanes with his grandfather Robert, stood at a podium and recited a rehearsed speech about uncovering hidden family truths and embracing biological connections over manufactured family ties. His words, clearly written by adults with an agenda, subtly dismissed everything I had taught him about love transcending blood relations. Chloe, my 13-year-old granddaughter, who used to call me every day after school, presented a drawing she had made of a happy family that conspicuously excluded me. When asked about it by reporters, she giggled and said, "Some people just don't belong in our family anymore." Watching that programmed display of emotional distance, seeing my beloved grandchildren turned into weapons against me, shattered what remained of my soul. These children whom I had rocked to sleep as babies, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose bedtime stories I had read, were now publicly declaring that I was not part of their family. In my deepest despair, as I contemplated whether life was worth continuing, an unexpected lifeline appeared. Margaret Chen, a former colleague I had mentored 30 years earlier, contacted me after hearing rumors about my situation. Margaret had risen to become a respected leader in child welfare, and she remembered the woman who had taught her to navigate complex family dynamics with compassion and wisdom. "Clara," she said when she found me at the shelter, "I don't care what anyone is saying about you. The woman who taught me that love makes a family doesn't just forget how to love. Something is very wrong here, and I intend to help you figure out what." Margaret offered crucial financial support to help me fight the legal battles, and more importantly, she connected me with a network of retired legal professionals who specialized in complex adoption fraud and elder abuse cases. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to reclaim my truth. But even with this unexpected support, the psychological damage was profound. I felt like a phantom, a person whose very existence had been systematically erased by the people who were supposed to love me most. The profound humiliation, the existential terror of being completely alone, the agonizing despair over my grandchildren's willing participation in my destruction, it all combined into a pain so deep, I sometimes wondered if it might actually kill me. Yet somewhere in the depths of that despair, a fierce determination was taking root. They had underestimated the woman who had once moved mountains to protect them. They had forgotten that survival instincts run deep and that even the most wounded animal will fight when cornered. The final assault on my character came disguised as an academic conference, but it was really a public execution of everything I had worked for my entire professional life. David, working with Brenda's extensive social connections and a network of ethically compromised legal and social work professionals, orchestrated a highly publicized national conference called Adoption Ethics in the Modern Era. The venue was the downtown convention center where I had once presented my own research on trauma-informed adoption practices. Now that same space would be used to systematically dismantle my life's work and present me as a cautionary tale of professional incompetence and ethical blindness. David was scheduled as the keynote speaker, positioned as a brave truth seeker who had uncovered profound deception in his own adoption. His presentation was based on a fabricated case study that was clearly, though not explicitly, about his own adoption, but distorted beyond all recognition. In his version, an unnamed social worker had engaged in systematic document falsification and conspiracy to deny biological heritage rights while presenting herself as an ethical professional. The audience, composed of social workers, adoption agencies, and legal professionals, listened with rapt attention as David painted a picture of adoption services corrupted by workers who believed they knew better than biological families. He never mentioned my name directly, but anyone familiar with our situation would recognize the story he was telling. Sometimes, David said, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, the very people we trust to preserve family integrity become the greatest threats to family truth. When adoption workers begin to see themselves as architects of destiny rather than servants of justice, they lose sight of their ethical obligations. Brenda followed with her own presentation about the importance of raw honesty over manufactured narratives. She spoke eloquently about families who had been damaged by social workers who prioritized their own vision of what family should be over the biological realities of what family actually was. We must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths, she declared, even when those truths challenge the reputations of respected professionals, even when those professionals are people we once trusted and loved. From my shelter cot using a borrowed laptop at the public library, I watched the live stream of this systematic destruction of my professional integrity. Every word felt like a physical blow as I witnessed my own adopted son and daughter-in-law present my life's work as a cautionary tale of ethical corruption and professional arrogance. They showed slides highlighting the dangers of unchecked social worker authority and the need for transparency in adoption proceedings. They discussed case studies of adoption fraud, always careful to avoid direct accusations, but creating an unmistakable impression that I represented everything wrong with the current system. The most unbearable moment came when they showed a pre-recorded video featuring Ethan, now 15, and clearly coached in his presentation. He spoke about his newfound appreciation for biological connections and the importance of moving beyond manufactured family ties that prioritize sentiment over truth. My generation understands that DNA doesn't lie, he said, looking directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who had never questioned where he belonged. We prefer science over stories, facts over feelings. It's time to move past outdated ideas about what makes a family. Watching my grandson, whom I had taught to ride a bicycle and helped with homework for years, publicly endorse the narrative of my professional incompetence was devastating beyond words. This child, who had once told me I was his favorite person in the world, was now presenting me as a relic of an outdated system that prioritized emotional manipulation over biological truth. Chloe appeared in a shorter video segment, giggling as she held up an old social services manual that had once belonged to me. Grandma used to read from this, she laughed. So old-fashioned, we prefer DNA tests now. The audience laughed along with her, and I felt my heart break all over again. My 13-year-old granddaughter was being used as a prop to mock everything I had dedicated my life to achieving. But the conference wasn't just about discrediting me professionally. It was about establishing David and Brenda as leading experts in uncovering hidden adoption truths and fighting for biological rights. They were positioning themselves as the future of ethical adoption practice while painting me and others like me as obstacles to progress and truth. The media coverage was extensive and uniformly positive. Headlines praised David's courage in confronting family secrets and Brenda's commitment to adoption transparency. Editorial pieces discussed the need for greater oversight of social workers and more stringent ethical guidelines for adoption proceedings. I became the unnamed villain in their story of triumph, the corrupt professional whose downfall represented progress toward a more honest and transparent system. My 30 years of building families, of matching children with loving homes, of navigating complex trauma with compassion and wisdom, were reduced to a footnote in their narrative of professional reform. However, not everyone in the professional community was convinced by this carefully orchestrated performance. Judge William Harrison, a respected retired family court judge who had worked closely with me on complex adoption cases for 15 years, watched the conference with growing disgust and suspicion. Judge Harrison had seen real adoption fraud during his career, and he recognized the difference between legitimate ethical concerns and calculated character assassination. He had witnessed my work firsthand, had seen the meticulous care I took with documentation, had observed my unwavering commitment to the best interests of children. The morning after the conference, he placed a call to Margaret Chen, my former colleague, who was now supporting my legal defense. "Something about this whole conference smells rotten," he told her. "I've worked with Clara for years, and the woman they're describing bears no resemblance to the professional I know. I want to help." Judge Harrison offered to provide a professional affidavit vouching for my impeccable ethical judgment and mental acuity. More importantly, he began reaching out to other retired judges and social workers who had worked with me, building a network of professionals willing to challenge the narrative that David and Brenda were creating. As I sat in that library, watching my life's work being systematically dismantled by people who claimed to love me, I felt a rage so pure and fierce that it actually gave me strength. They had taken my family, my home, my financial security, and my reputation. Now they were trying to erase my professional legacy and turn my life's greatest achievements into evidence of failure and corruption. But they had made a crucial mistake. In their eagerness to destroy me completely, they had begun to overreach to make claims that couldn't be substantiated, to present a version of events that didn't match the documented evidence of my career. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of the woman I used to be. The woman who had once moved mountains to protect children and build families was still alive somewhere inside me, buried under months of trauma and betrayal, but not destroyed. They wanted to play games with professional ethics and legal proceedings. They had just reminded me that I knew those systems better than they ever would. And now, with allies who understood the truth and the courage to speak it, I was ready to fight back. The final phase of my destruction was engineered with the cold precision of a corporate takeover. David, now emboldened by his success at the Adoption Ethics Conference and working closely with Mark and Brenda's expanding network of legal and financial contacts, initiated what could only be described as a calculated financial annihilation designed to strip me of every remaining shred of dignity and independence. The assault began with a frivolous but legally complex lawsuit that David filed against me for $350,000 in damages for emotional distress, defamation of character, and intentional interference with biological family relationships. His claim alleged that my obsessive accusations and attempted concealment of his true identity had caused him severe psychological trauma that required extensive therapy and had damaged his reputation in the community. The lawsuit was crafted by expensive lawyers who understood exactly how to create maximum financial damage while maintaining plausible legal standing. Every motion required a response. Every response required legal fees, and every legal fee pushed me further toward complete destitution. The irony was that I was being sued for emotional distress by the son whose emotional well-being I had spent 31 years protecting through lies and criminal activity. But David's legal assault was just the beginning. Working with information provided by Mark and Brenda about my declining mental state, he contacted my former social services agency and retirement fund administrators with carefully crafted reports expressing deep concern about my mental competence and erratic behavior. The reports painted a picture of a woman in cognitive decline who was making increasingly irrational accusations against family members and exhibiting paranoid delusions about her professional history. They suggested that I was no longer capable of managing my own finances and might be vulnerable to exploitation by unscrupulous individuals who could take advantage of my confusion. These reports triggered automatic investigations that resulted in the permanent revocation of my social services pension and the removal of any professional honors or recognition I had received during my career. The agency alleged gross misconduct related to my past adoption cases based entirely on David's fabricated claims, effectively erasing 30 years of dedicated service and leaving me completely without income. The loss of my pension was devastating, but the public nature of the allegations was even worse. Local newspapers picked up the story of a disgraced social worker whose unethical practices had finally been exposed by her own family. I became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked professional authority and the courage required to expose corruption even when it involved family members. The timing of my final eviction was not coincidental. Brenda, with her talent for public relations manipulation, ensured that my removal from the transitional housing facility would attract maximum media attention. She contacted local news stations with a story about a troubled elderly woman who was disrupting a facility designed to help genuinely needy individuals. When the sheriff's deputies arrived to remove me from my temporary shelter, Reporters and cameras were already waiting. I was filmed being escorted from the building with my few remaining possessions stuffed into garbage bags, a profound public disgrace for a woman who had once commanded respect in the community. The footage was broadcast on local news with commentary about the sad decline of a once respected professional and the difficult decisions families must make when dealing with elderly relatives in crisis. Brenda provided a brief interview expressing her deep sadness about my situation while making it clear that my own choices had led to my circumstances. Sometimes, she said, looking directly into the camera with practiced sincerity, the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop enabling their self-destructive behavior. We hope Clara will eventually get the help she needs. I was literally rendered homeless again, stripped of dignity and self-reliance, forced to seek shelter in a crowded, impersonal public facility where privacy was non-existent and hope was a luxury none of us could afford. The fluorescent lights buzzed constantly, the air smelled of disinfectant and despair, and every night I fell asleep to the sounds of other broken lives seeking refuge from storms they couldn't weather alone. Mark and Lisa, fully absorbed in their comfortable lives and the narrative they had created to justify their abandonment of me, maintained a chilling indifference to my impending homelessness and public destitution. When reporters occasionally asked Mark about his mother's situation, he would simply state that he had no obligation to support someone who has made such destructive choices. My responsibility is to my wife and children, he would say. I can't sacrifice their well-being to enable my mother's delusions and manipulation. Sometimes love means setting boundaries. Lisa took a different approach, using her position as a registered nurse to add medical credibility to claims about my mental decline. She would speak sadly about early signs of dementia and the difficult process of accepting that someone you love is no longer the person they used to be. Brenda continued her social media campaign with posts about busy schedules and focusing on positive energy, subtly implying that I was causing unnecessary drama that they were too healthy and productive to engage with. She shared inspirational quotes about moving forward from toxic relationships and protecting your peace from negative influences. If any of them encountered me on the street during this period, they would literally look away, unable or unwilling to face the consequences of their systematic destruction of my life. I had become a ghost to them, a homeless woman whose suffering was an inconvenient reminder of choices they preferred not to examine too closely. But David's most cruel act of psychological warfare was yet to come. Using a substantial portion of the money he had claimed from Robert's estate, he made a highly publicized donation to establish a biological heritage fund at the local historical society. The fund was ostensibly designed to help adoptees research their genealogical roots and connect with their biological families. The dedication ceremony was covered extensively by local media, with David presenting himself as a generous benefactor committed to helping others avoid the family trauma he had experienced. He publicly dedicated the fund to Mark and Brenda as a tribute to their strength and wisdom in supporting biological truth over comfortable lies. Photos of the ceremony were widely shared on social media, showing David cutting a ribbon while Mark and Brenda smiled proudly beside him. The Historical Society, where I had once volunteered and donated my time and expertise, was now hosting a memorial to my alleged professional failures funded by money that should have been part of my security in old age. This public act of generosity was the ultimate transformation of my family's stolen legacy into a cruel trophy of their deceit. They had not only destroyed my life, but had turned that destruction into a source of community recognition and social status. The relentless psychological and financial siege finally took its toll on my physical health. The constant stress, the inadequate nutrition, the lack of proper shelter, and the crushing weight of systematic betrayal combined to create a perfect storm of health failure. I suffered a severe stress-induced heart attack that left me unconscious and near death in the emergency room of the public hospital. As I lay in that hospital bed, my life hanging by a thread, I was utterly alone except for Margaret Chen and the small network of allies she had assembled. My own children were nowhere to be found. My grandchildren had been taught to see me as a cautionary tale, and the community I had served for decades had been convinced that my downfall was evidence of justice finally being served. But even in that moment of physical collapse, when my body was finally giving up under the immense pressure, my mind began to retrieve fragments of memory that had been buried for decades. In my semi-conscious state, I experienced vivid dreams about a specific adoption case I had handled early in my career, involving a powerful family that had covered up a scandalous birth through document falsification and legal manipulation. As the fragments coalesced into a complete memory, I realized with chilling clarity that my own parents had been involved in similar ethical compromises, that the very foundation of my own identity might be built on the same kinds of lies and cover-ups that I had spent my career navigating for others. This agonizing revelation, the confirmation that my own family history was built on hidden secrets and potential fraud, ignited something fierce and desperate in my failing heart. If my own origins were shrouded in the same kinds of deception I had used to protect David, then perhaps I had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Perhaps it was time to stop trying to preserve family unity and start exposing family truth, no matter how devastating the consequences might be for everyone involved. From my hospital bed, slowly recovering from the heart attack that had nearly killed me, and fueled by the devastating dream memory of my parents' hidden fraud, I made a decision that would either save me or destroy me completely. I was going to tell the truth, all of it, no matter what it cost me or anyone else. With the help of my compassionate nurse, Maria, who had worked in elder care long enough to recognize systematic family abuse when she saw it, I began dictating a raw emotional video message that would serve as my final plea for justice and reconciliation. The recording was not polished or professional. It was the desperate testimony of a dying woman who had nothing left to lose. In the video, I didn't make accusations or demands. Instead, I simply recounted my lifelong dedication to preserving family truth and my unconditional love for children who had turned against me. I played unedited audio recordings of contentious family meetings that I had secretly made recordings where Mark and Lisa explicitly blamed me for their problems and dismissed my attempts to explain my perspective. The recordings revealed the systematic nature of their psychological warfare, the calculated cruelty of their coordinated attacks, and the stark difference between their public image as concerned children and their private behavior as manipulative aggressors. Most dramatically, I included a segment playing a hidden voicemail from my late mother, recorded just weeks before her death, in which she expressed deep guilt about the secret about Clara's birth and her fear that the truth about what we did might come out someday. Her voice, weak and filled with regret, spoke of documents that had been falsified and official records that had been altered to hide what really happened when Clara was born. This was the first time I had shared my mother's deathbed confession with anyone, the revelation that my own birth certificate and early life records contained the same kinds of lies and fabrications that I had later used to protect David. The cosmic irony was overwhelming. I was the product of the same system of deception that I had perpetuated a child, whose true origins had been hidden by parents who believed they were protecting me from a painful truth. Finally, without revealing the specific details that could still destroy lives, I made a direct appeal to Mark's conscience, reminding him of the night I had saved him from criminal charges in prison, the massive debts I had paid, the sacrifices I had made that he had never known about. "Mark," I said, looking directly into the camera with what remained of my strength, "you owe your freedom, your family, your entire life to sacrifices I made that you have never acknowledged because I never wanted you to feel burdened by them. I'm not asking you to be grateful. I'm asking you to remember who raised you and whether the woman who saved your life deserves to die homeless and alone." Maria helped me send this video message to Mark and Brenda through a secure email account, hoping that seeing my pain and hearing the truth might finally crack through the wall of resentment and manipulation that had been built around their hearts. But David, through a network of allies that included staff members at the hospital who were feeding him information about my condition and activities, intercepted the message before Mark and Brenda could fully watch it. Using his connections with digital media specialists, he immediately began manipulating the raw audio and video, subtly altering tone, splicing segments out of context, adding ominous background noise, and cutting sentences to completely change their meaning. The doctored version transformed my desperate plea for understanding into what appeared to be rambling paranoid accusations from a mentally unstable woman making grandiose claims about her own importance and threatening to expose family secrets unless her demands were met. My mother's deathbed confession was edited to sound like evidence of my own delusions about hidden conspiracies. David then sold this heavily manipulated video to a prominent national gossip news channel, framing it as exclusive footage of a dying manipulator attempting to blackmail her own family with fabricated evidence of past sacrifices. The story was presented as a cautionary tale about elderly family members who become dangerous when their mental faculties decline. The national broadcast was devastating beyond anything I could have imagined. Millions of viewers watched what they believed was authentic footage of me making paranoid accusations and grandiose claims about my importance to my family's success. The manipulation was so skillful that even I might have questioned my own sanity if I hadn't known the truth about what I had actually said. The media coverage painted me as a perfect example of how aging can transform loving family members into manipulative burdens who use guilt and false claims to control their adult children. Expert commentators discuss the tragedy of dementia-related personality changes and the difficult decisions families must make when elderly relatives become threatening or delusional. Mark and Brenda's response was swift and perfectly calculated for maximum public sympathy. They appeared on national television the morning after the broadcast, giving tearful interviews about their profound sadness over my deteriorating mental state. They asked for privacy during this difficult time and expressed hope that I would find peace through proper medical treatment. "We love my mother." Mark said, his voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "But the woman in that video is not the woman who raised us. We're dealing with someone who has become dangerous in her desperation, and while it breaks our hearts, we have to protect our children from this instability." Brenda nodded tearfully. "It's so hard to watch someone you care about deteriorate like this. We just want her to get the help she needs, but we can't sacrifice our family's safety and well-being to enable her delusions. The performance was so convincing, so emotionally manipulative, that even I felt a moment of doubt about my own memories and motivations. They had turned my greatest act of vulnerability into evidence of their victimhood, transforming my desperate plea for recognition into proof of their patience and love in the face of my unreasonable demands. Ethan and Chloe were included in the media coverage, coached to look sad and worried as they expressed hope that Grandma would get better soon. Their manipulated concern was broadcast globally, cementing my public image as a delusional elderly woman whose own grandchildren feared her instability. "We miss the way Grandma used to be," Chloe said, her 13-year-old voice perfectly modulated for maximum emotional impact. "We hope the doctors can help her remember how to be nice again." The viral nature of the story meant that my shame was amplified far beyond our local community. I became a national symbol of the dangers of elderly mental decline and the courage required by families to protect themselves from manipulative relatives. Support groups for families dealing with aging parents shared my story as an example of how quickly loving relationships could become toxic and dangerous. But not everyone was convinced by this carefully orchestrated narrative. Dr. Richard Sterling, a retired forensic genealogist who specialized in document analysis and digital media authentication, had been following my story through his professional networks. When he saw the viral video, his decades of experience with manipulated evidence immediately raised red flags. Dr. Sterling contacted Margaret Chen and offered his services pro bono, providing meticulous analysis that revealed irrefutable proof of digital manipulation in the video. His report detailed specific instances of audio splicing, background noise insertion, and tonal alteration that completely changed the meaning of my original message. More importantly, his preliminary genealogical research into my family history had uncovered evidence that supported my mother's deathbed confession about falsified documents related to my birth. The truth I had kept hidden for decades was beginning to emerge through objective scientific analysis that could not be dismissed as the delusions of a mentally unstable elderly woman. As I lay in that hospital bed, watching my deepest suffering being twisted and used as a weapon against me, feeling the crushing weight of global humiliation and the agonizing realization that my own grandchildren had been turned into actors in my public destruction, I experienced a rage so pure and focused that it actually began to heal something broken inside me. They had stolen my voice and used it as evidence of my instability. They had taken my truth and transformed it into proof of their victimhood. They had convinced the world that my love was manipulation and my suffering was justice. But they had made one fatal mistake. In their eagerness to destroy me completely, they had created a digital trail of lies that could be scientifically analyzed and legally challenged. They had underestimated the power of objective evidence and the existence of professionals who specialized in exposing exactly the kinds of deception they had perpetrated. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had allies with the expertise to fight back and evidence that could not be dismissed or manipulated. The war for my truth was about to begin in earnest. Armed with Dr. Sterling's irrefutable evidence of digital manipulation and Margaret Chen's network of legal professionals, my team launched what would become one of the most closely watched elder abuse cases in recent history. The federal civil and criminal lawsuit we filed against David, Mark, and Brenda included charges of fraud conspiracy to conceal identity, systematic elder abuse, and national defamation. The case attracted immense media attention, not just because of the viral video that had made me a national symbol of elderly decline, but because the evidence we were presenting challenged everything the public had been led to believe about my story. The courthouse was packed on the day Dr. Sterling was scheduled to present his forensic analysis. News crews lined the street, reporters filled every available seat, and the proceedings were broadcast live across multiple networks. This was the moment when months of careful investigation would either vindicate me completely or confirm my family's narrative that I was a delusional old woman clinging to fabricated grievances. Dr. Sterling approached the witness stand with the calm confidence of a man who had spent decades exposing lies through scientific analysis. His presentation was methodical, devastating, and utterly compelling. Using large screens visible to the entire courtroom, he displayed side-by-side comparisons of my original video message and the manipulated version that David had sold to the media. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Dr. Sterling began his voice, carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. What you are about to see is one of the most sophisticated examples of digital manipulation I have encountered in 30 years of forensic analysis. He played segments of both videos, highlighting specific instances where my words had been taken out of context, where background noise had been added to create ominous undertones, where my tone had been digitally altered to sound more aggressive and unstable. He showed how entire sentences had been spliced together from different parts of the recording to create statements I had never made. In this instance, he explained, pointing to a waveform analysis on the screen, we can see clear evidence of digital splicing. Mrs. Henderson said, I hope Mark will remember the love we shared. But the defendant altered this to Mark will pay for what he's done. The manipulation required sophisticated software and considerable expertise. But Dr. Sterling's most shocking revelation was yet to come. His preliminary genealogical research into my family history had uncovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about my story. Using DNA evidence obtained from a discarded coffee cup during one of my hospital visits, along with obscure public records and cross-referencing with historical documents, he had traced my true biological origins. Your Honor, Dr. Sterling continued, his voice growing more serious. Our investigation has revealed that Mrs. Henderson herself was the victim of document falsification and identity concealment that dates back to her own birth 70 years ago. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of confusion and shock. Even I felt my breath catch as Dr. Sterling began to explain the truth about my origins that my parents had hidden from me my entire life. Mrs. Henderson's adoptive parents, working with Dr. Marcus Thompson, fabricated her birth certificate, falsified hospital records, and created a complete false identity to conceal her true biological origins. Mrs. Henderson was born to a wealthy, prominent family, but the circumstances of her conception involved a family scandal that powerful people wanted erased from history. The screens displayed copies of original documents that Dr. Sterling had uncovered through painstaking research, hospital records that showed my birth under a different name, adoption papers that had been sealed and hidden, financial records showing large payments made to Dr. Thompson for his discretionary services. The irony, Dr. Sterling said, looking directly at the jury, is profound. Mrs. Henderson spent her entire career helping adoptees find loving homes, never knowing that she herself was adopted under circumstances involving the same kinds of document falsification that she later used to protect David from his traumatic origins. When Dr. Thompson was called to the witness stand, the elderly physician was a shadow of the confident man who had once wielded such power over people's lives. Confronted with overwhelming evidence of his decades-long conspiracy, he broke down completely, his voice shaking as he confessed to his role in fabricating my birth records and facilitating the adoption cover-up. "I was young," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "They offered me more money than I had ever seen. I thought I was helping protect a family's reputation. I never considered the children who would grow up living lies." His confession revealed the full scope of the conspiracy that had shaped my entire life. My biological mother had been a young woman from a prominent family who had been assaulted by a powerful man. To avoid scandal, the family had arranged for my secret adoption and created an entirely new identity for me, complete with falsified documents and manufactured history. David's reaction to these revelations was as dramatic as it was damaging to any remaining credibility he might have had. As the evidence mounted and the true scope of the deception became clear, his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The composed, articulate man who had presented himself as a victim seeking biological truth became increasingly agitated and desperate. When called to testify in his own defense, David suffered a complete psychological collapse in front of the cameras and packed courtroom. His composure shattered, completely replaced by incoherent screams of rage and desperate denials that only confirmed his guilt and malice. "She's lying," he screamed, pointing at me with wild eyes. "She's making it all up. I deserve that money. She owes me for 30 years of pretending to love me. I was just an experiment to her." The breakdown was painful to witness even for someone who had suffered so much at his hands. This was the child I had raised, now revealed as a man whose greed and resentment had consumed whatever capacity for love he might once have possessed. But perhaps the most agonizing moment came when Mark was called to testify. Confronted with the overwhelming evidence of my true origins and his own role in perpetuating the lies and abuse, my biological son's facade crumbled just as completely as David's had. Mark's breakdown was different, though. Where David's collapse was fueled by rage and denial, Mark's was driven by profound shame and guilt. He wept openly on the witness stand, his voice breaking as he confessed his fear, his weakness, and his profound regret for the pain he had caused me. "I knew," he sobbed, his words barely audible through his tears. "Deep down, I always knew something wasn't right about how we were treating her. But Brenda convinced me that Mom was trying to manipulate us, and I was so angry about David getting equal treatment that I let myself believe it. I let my own jealousy and fear turn me into someone who could abandon his own mother. Watching my son break down, seeing the genuine anguish in his face as he finally confronted the truth about his actions was devastating in a completely different way than David's rage had been. This was pain mixed with vindication, sorrow, combined with the first glimpse of possible redemption. The courtroom fell silent as Mark continued his confession, his words carrying the weight of months of suppressed guilt and self-loathing. "She saved my life when I was young, and I repaid her by trying to destroy hers. I will never forgive myself for what I did. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for betraying the woman who loved me unconditionally." As I sat in that witness gallery, watching the truth finally emerge, after months of systematic lies and manipulation, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and profound sadness. The evidence had spoken, the conspiracy had been exposed, and my tormentors were facing the consequences of their actions. But the cost of reaching this moment had been enormous, and some of the damage could never be fully repaired. The court's verdict was swift and decisive, delivered by Judge Patricia Williams with the gravity befitting such a complex case of family betrayal and systematic elder abuse. The packed courtroom fell silent as she read the sweeping judgment that would reshape all of our lives forever. David was found guilty on all charges: fraud, conspiracy to conceal identity, elder abuse, and defamation. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison, calling his actions a calculated campaign of psychological torture against the woman who had saved him from a traumatic childhood. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, and his future reduced to the grim reality of prison walls and the knowledge that his greed had cost him everything. Mark received a sentence of 4 years in prison for his direct complicity in the elder abuse and financial conspiracy. While his eventual breakdown and confession had earned him some consideration, the judge made it clear that adult children who systematically abuse elderly parents must face serious consequences, regardless of their ultimate remorse. Brenda was sentenced to 2 years in prison and substantial financial penalties for her role in orchestrating the psychological manipulation and social media campaigns that had nearly destroyed my reputation. Her carefully crafted image as a concerned family member was revealed to be a calculated performance designed to isolate and control me. Dr. Thompson's medical license was permanently revoked, and he faced criminal charges for his decades-long involvement in document falsification. At 83 years old, he would spend his remaining years as a symbol of how professional power could be corrupted by greed and moral weakness. But beyond the criminal sentences, the court issued something even more important to me: a formal judgment that completely vindicated my character and professional integrity. Judge Williams delivered a powerful statement that was broadcast nationally, condemning the systematic abuse of elderly family members and the psychological manipulation that had nearly driven me to despair. Clara Henderson, the judge declared, represents the triumph of truth over deception, courage over fear, and integrity over manipulation. This court finds that she has been the victim of a conspiracy so elaborate and cruel that it challenges our understanding of family loyalty and human decency. Her reputation is hereby fully restored, and her character is beyond reproach. This legal validation was more than just a court ruling. It was a profound restoration of my dignity and legacy after months of public humiliation and private torment. The woman who had been painted as a delusional elder was now officially recognized as a victim of one of the most sophisticated elder abuse cases in recent legal history. David's disgrace was complete and public. The man who had once been featured as a keynote speaker at adoption ethics conferences was now serving time in federal prison, stripped of his reputation and revealed as the architect of a cruel conspiracy against the woman who had raised him with love. He became a symbol of how greed and resentment could transform someone into a monster capable of destroying the very people who had sacrificed everything for them. From his prison cell, Mark began what would be a long and difficult journey toward redemption. The first letter I received from him was 20 pages of raw, honest self-examination written in the shaky handwriting of a man whose world had completely collapsed. "Mom," he wrote, "I know that saying I'm sorry is completely inadequate for what I did to you. I know that my apologies can't undo the months of terror and humiliation I put you through. But I need you to know that I am in intensive therapy, working every day to understand how I became someone capable of such cruelty toward the woman who saved my life and loved me unconditionally." His letters continued to arrive regularly, each one revealing more progress in his painful process of self-discovery and accountability. He wrote about the gambling addiction I had secretly resolved, acknowledging for the first time that he had always known about my sacrifices, but had chosen to minimize them because accepting their magnitude would have required him to confront his own selfishness. I spent years resenting David for getting equal treatment when I was your biological son, he confessed in one particularly heartbreaking letter. I never stopped to consider that equal treatment was exactly what a loving mother should provide. I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I forgot to be grateful for what I had received. Lisa's path to reconciliation was different, but equally profound. She sought me out privately as soon as the trial ended, arriving at my temporary apartment with tears streaming down her face and a heart full of genuine remorse. "Mom," she said, falling into my arms like the little girl she had once been, "I was a coward. I let fear and peer pressure turn me into someone who could abandon her own mother. I knew in my heart that something was wrong about how we were treating you, but I was too weak to stand up to Mark and Brenda." Lisa's commitment to making amends was immediate and total. She quit her job to become my full-time advocate and companion, determined to spend however many years it took to rebuild the trust she had destroyed. Her transformation from passive enabler to steadfast protector was one of the few bright lights in the aftermath of our family's destruction. The grandchildren's healing process was perhaps the most delicate and important aspect of our family's recovery. Ethan and Chloe had been traumatized not just by the trial and their father's imprisonment, but by the realization that they had been used as weapons against someone who loved them unconditionally. 15-year-old Ethan struggled with profound guilt over his participation in the Adoption Ethics Conference and the public statements he had made dismissing my role in their family. "Grandma," he said during one of our first honest conversations, "they told me you were sick and that agreeing with them would help you get better. I didn't know they were using me to hurt you." 13-year-old Chloe's confusion was even more heartbreaking. She couldn't understand how the adults she trusted had manipulated her into participating in my destruction, or why she had been taught to see me as a threat when I had never been anything but loving toward her. Through months of family therapy and patient conversations, we began to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. The children learned about my true character, my professional accomplishments, and the sacrifices I had made for their family. They began to understand that love, not genetics, defines family relationships, and that their grandmother had always been their protector, never their enemy. Brenda's isolation was complete and well-deserved. Released from prison after serving her 2-year sentence, she found herself completely ostracized by the community that had once admired her social status and apparent family values. Her calculated manipulation and cruel ambition had been exposed for the world to see, leaving her without friends, family, or any semblance of the life she had once enjoyed. The woman who had orchestrated so much of my suffering now lived alone in a small apartment, her grandiose plans reduced to the reality of a reputation that could never be repaired. She served as a stark reminder that those who build their lives on the destruction of others ultimately destroy themselves. As I watched these various threads of justice and redemption play out, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction, sorrow, and cautious hope. The truth had finally emerged, the guilty had been punished, and some relationships were beginning to heal. But the scars left by this experience would take years to fully address, and some wounds might never completely heal. The most important realization was that authentic relationships could only be built on truth, accountability, and genuine remorse. Mark and Lisa's willingness to face their failures honestly gave me hope that we could eventually rebuild something meaningful from the wreckage of our family. David's continued denial and self-pity confirmed that some damage was irreparable. Justice had been served, but the real work of healing and rebuilding was just beginning. 2 years after the trial that changed everything, I stand in the sunlit kitchen of my new home, a modest but beautiful house that Lisa helped me choose, watching my grandchildren laugh as they help me prepare Sunday dinner. The sound of their voices, free now from the shadow of manipulation and fear, fills my heart with a joy I once thought I would never experience again. My life has been transformed in ways I never could have imagined during those dark months when I was homeless and convinced that my family's betrayal would be the final chapter of my story. Instead, it became the beginning of the most authentic and purposeful period of my entire 71 years. The truth about my own origins, devastating as it was to learn, became the foundation for a profound journey of self-discovery and healing. And working with genealogists and historians, I meticulously researched my biological family's history, uncovering a complex narrative of love, loss, and sacrifice that helped me understand not just where I came from, but who I was meant to become. I learned that my biological mother had been a remarkable woman whose tragic circumstances led to my adoption, but whose strength and intelligence lived on in me. Understanding this connection to my past helped me make peace with the lies that had shaped my early life, while embracing the truth that would define my future. My professional reputation, once destroyed by calculated lies, was not only restored, but elevated to new heights. The adoption agencies and social services organizations that had once shunned me now sought my expertise and guidance. I became a leading advocate for transparency in adoption records and ethical practices in family services, my personal experience lending unprecedented credibility to my work. But perhaps most importantly, I found my true calling as a national advocate for elder rights and family accountability. Working with my legal team and the network of professionals who had helped expose the truth, I established a foundation dedicated to protecting elderly family members from systematic abuse and providing resources for those seeking to uncover hidden family histories. My memoir, The Truth Will Set You Free, A Mother's Journey Through Betrayal to Redemption, became a bestseller and helped countless other families navigate complex situations involving adoption, inheritance, and family loyalty. Speaking at conferences across the country, I shared my story not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as a survivor offering hope and practical guidance to others facing similar challenges. Mark's journey toward redemption has been slow but genuine. Released from prison after serving 3 years of his 4-year sentence, he entered a residential treatment program where he continues to work on understanding the psychological factors that led to his betrayal of our family bonds. His letters, now arriving monthly rather than weekly, show continued growth and self-awareness. Mom, he wrote in his most recent letter, I'm learning that love isn't about what we think we deserve, but about what we're willing to give without expecting anything in return. You love David and me equally because that's what real mothers do. And I was too immature and selfish to appreciate that gift. I'm working every day to become someone worthy of your forgiveness, even if that forgiveness never comes. While our relationship remains cautious and limited, I can see glimpses of the man I raised with love, buried beneath years of resentment and manipulation. Complete reconciliation may never be possible, but I have found peace in knowing that he is finally confronting his failures honestly and working to become a better person. Lisa has become not just my daughter again, but my closest friend and most trusted companion. Her dedication to making amends has been unwavering, and our relationship now is deeper and more authentic than it ever was before the crisis that nearly destroyed our family. She accompanies me to speaking engagements, helps manage my foundation work, and has become a powerful advocate for elder rights in her own nursing career. I lost my mother for a while. She often tells audiences when we speak together, but I found her again by choosing truth over comfort, accountability over denial. The woman I have the privilege of calling Mom today is stronger, wiser, and more inspiring than I ever understood her to be before. The grandchildren, now 17 and 15, have grown into thoughtful, compassionate young people who understand the importance of family loyalty based on love rather than obligation. Ethan has chosen to pursue social work in college, inspired by his grandmother's example of using personal pain to help others. Chloe has become a gifted writer who often helps me with my advocacy work, using her talent to give voice to those who have been silenced by family abuse. David remains in prison, his appeals exhausted, and his future grim. I have not visited him, nor do I plan to, but I harbor no hatred for the man whose greed nearly destroyed my life. He made choices that reflected his true character, and he is now living with the consequences of those choices. I have found peace in accepting that some relationships cannot be salvaged, and that protecting myself from further harm is not selfish, but necessary. Brenda continues to live in isolation, her attempts to rebuild her reputation consistently thwarted by the documented evidence of her cruelty and manipulation. She serves as a reminder that those who build their lives on the destruction of others ultimately destroy themselves, but she is no longer a source of fear or concern in my life. My days are now filled with purpose and genuine joy. I wake each morning in a home filled with love and authenticity, surrounded by people who value me for who I truly am, rather than what they think they can get from me. My work helps other families avoid the devastation that nearly consumed ours, and my story offers hope to those who thought their own situations were hopeless. The woman who once questioned her own sanity while living in a homeless shelter now stands as a beacon of strength and resilience for countless others facing seemingly impossible challenges. The pain of betrayal has been transformed into the power to help others, and the lies that once defined my existence have been replaced by a truth that sets me free every single day. As I sit in my garden this morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I am filled with a profound sense of peace that I never thought possible during those dark months when my world collapsed around me. My home, once a symbol of everything I thought I knew about family and love, has become a sanctuary of truth and authentic connection, frequently filled with the laughter of Lisa and my grandchildren, our bonds rebuilt on honesty, respect, and genuine affection. The journey from homeless shelter to respected national advocate has taught me that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest pain, and that the courage to confront deception can transform even the most devastating betrayal into a source of wisdom and purpose. I am now a revered figure in elder advocacy, circles my story serving as a beacon of hope for countless others seeking their own truth in the face of family manipulation and systematic abuse. My days are rich with meaningful work helping other elderly parents navigate complex family dynamics and protect themselves from financial and emotional exploitation. The foundation I established has helped hundreds of families uncover hidden truths and rebuild relationships on more honest foundations. The pain that once threatened to destroy me has become the cornerstone of a legacy that will help others long after I am gone. Looking back on this arduous journey, I understand now that my greatest strength lay not in blind trust or protecting family facades, but in courageously confronting deception and fighting for the integrity of my own history and identity. I learned that self-worth is an unshakable foundation that cannot be destroyed by others' manipulation, and that true family is built on transparency and genuine connection, not secrets, obligation, or shared genetics alone. I carry no bitterness toward those who betrayed me, only a profound wisdom gained from transforming my deepest pain into lasting purpose. The experience taught me that authenticity can be reclaimed even after profound betrayal, that truth will ultimately prevail over even the most sophisticated lies, and that a life of purpose and genuine connection is always possible, regardless of age or circumstances. To anyone listening to my story who may be facing their own family crisis, I want you to know that your truth matters. Your worth is not determined by others' treatment of you, and your story is not over until you decide it is. The courage to stand up for yourself, even against those who claim to love you, is not selfish, but necessary. Trust your instincts, seek help when you need it, and never let anyone convince you that you deserve less than honesty, respect, and genuine love. Family is not defined by blood or legal documents, but by those who choose to stand by you. When the truth becomes difficult, who celebrate your victories without jealousy, and who love you for who you are, rather than what you can provide them. Sometimes, the family that matters most is the one you build through shared values and mutual respect, rather than the one you were born into. The truth will set you free, but first it may break your heart. That breaking, painful as it is, can become the space where authentic light finally enters, illuminating a path toward a life more genuine and fulfilling than anything built on lies could ever be.